Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined with Brian Howell from the Boulder Daily Camera. He's also been contributing to BuffStampede.com here. Brian, a crazy 6 weeks since we last saw each other.
Yeah, it has been. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you since then, but yeah, a lot's gone on. And, I think the last time we saw each other was Pro Day. And
Yep.
we actually, we did a podcast and we went to lunch and then went to Pro Day. And then after that, everything shut down literally the next day. So
even during that podcast, that was when CU announced they were going to online classes. And that Wednesday, I think it was March 11th. Yeah, you're right. It kind of hit the fan.
Yeah, and it felt weird sort of doing that podcast, a spring preview, because we were like, well, we don't know if spring's going to happen. And then sure enough, it was weird being at Pro Day. Just there was a lot of, like, you'd go up and say hi to somebody and you go to shake their hand, like, oh, wait, maybe a fist bump is better right here. So it was just kind of starting to be a thing. And then all of a sudden, just like that, it switched. And so it's been a weird 6 weeks and literally have not seen anybody on the beat since then.
I've always been a fan of the fist bump. If we can maybe take one positive from this pandemic, maybe we could just go to that going forward, I feel like.
Maybe that'll be the go-to thing now.
Yeah, so you recently had a chance to chat with Carl Durrell. I think you're working on a preview magazine. We've had a chance to chat with him a few times, and not a whole lot. Really, aside from the intro press conference, we have not been around him. What was the general takeaway you had from that interview?
Yeah, it was good. I've been doing the preview for Athlon magazine the past several years, and really up until that point, my only, I guess, one-on-one time with him was about a 10-minute phone call. So it was good. Chat with him about 30 minutes or so, and really kind of go over the whole team. And I let him know, say, hey, I'm doing this for Athlon, but I'm going to use this for the Daily Camera as well. And so I didn't want to make it so it was just for that. But he's definitely got a plan. They know what they want to do offensively, defensively. He did tell me, he said, hey, you never go into a season saying this is our playbook and this is what we're going to run, because you have to evaluate things off who your personnel is and tweak things. So he said we basically have a blueprint, and then we'll take that blueprint once we get on the field and tweak it a little bit. And I asked him, I said, do you have time to tweak, with not having spring ball? Because I brought up to him, my first ever conversation with Jim Levitt was after Jim's first spring. And, I chatted with him. It was over the summer. And Jim said, well, I learned a lot in the spring what we can't do. And so now in the summer, I'm revamping the defense so we know what we can do in the fall. Well, Carl and his staff doesn't have that luxury right now. And he said, that's okay. We'll be able to tweak things based off the plan we have. It certainly helps that the coordinators are back.
Yeah, with Tyson Summers, I don't feel like there's going to be a whole lot changing defensively. You ran a story on our site about the star position is going to still be called the star. And that was a selling point to keep Tyson Summers, was to have that continuity. Offensively, I still don't know if I have a strong feeling for how this offense is going to look. It's going to definitely have spread concepts. It's not going to be a straight up air raid offense, but I still don't quite have a grasp of what that offense is going to look like.
I don't either, even after that conversation with him. I think it's going to be very multiple. I think there's a lot of teams that want to do kind of what the New England Patriots do, which is they've been masters at, okay, this week to beat the Tennessee Titans, we've got to do this. This week to beat the Miami Dolphins, we got to do this. And their offense looks different from week to week sometimes. That's, I think, what they want to do. Carl mentioned to me they've got a lot of experience. He's been in the Shanahan offense. He's been in the New England system. He's been in lots of different offenses. Chiaverini has air raid concepts. Then you have Danny Langsdorff, who's got a lot of experience. So he's trying to mesh all of that into, what he hopes is a good concept. Now, one thing we can tell is the tight ends are going to be involved. They've got a lot of tight ends. They've added 3 walk-on tight ends in the last month or so. That's by design, and the tight ends are going to be very heavily involved. That is a Durrell influence, and he told me flat out, he said, you can see right there my influence on the offense is with those tight ends.
That kind of segues me into the next topic here. Taylor Embry, one of the, I guess, the most inexperienced guy coming on staff. He brings in, not earth-shattering news, but he brings in 3 quality walk-ons at that position, 2 of which will definitely be eligible. The other is hoping for that ruling to come down from the NCAA, which I don't even know if that's going to happen for the upcoming season, but he's hopeful that he's going to play. But anyway, I've been impressed with his energy early on. Obviously, you can't have firm impressions based on recruiting right now because they can't get kids on campus. They're not going to get commits right now. But Taylor Embry, Mitch Rodri, another guy that maybe fans question the hire there. Those guys have been working pretty hard during this quarantine situation in terms of recruiting. Demetrius Martin had a great reputation as a recruiter coming on, and he's done a good job in that sense. And even Chris Wilson's been pretty active with offers. What would have been your impressions of those assistants, even though, again, there's not a whole lot to base this evaluation off of so far?
Yeah, I would kind of list those same guys you did. And Taylor, he's the one, I guess, of all of them, you look at him and say, okay, he's the least experienced. He hasn't been in college. Can he recruit? Well, I guess what we're looking at so far is yes, he can. And I think, John Embry, for all of his faults, he did bring in some good recruits, and he did know how to recruit a little bit. And so maybe some of that has rubbed off on Taylor. But, the tight end position, they've got some good guys they're after. They've brought in 3 pretty good, what look like pretty good walk-on transfers here. Mitch Rodriguez has been very busy. There's been a lot of offensive linemen that he's offered, and none really in the state, but there's been a lot in the South, and he's using those pipelines. And, that's a position they obviously have to recruit. I mean, he's one of the most important. I don't know if he's one of the most important recruiters, but that position has got to be most recruited. So I like what they've done so far. I mean, they're limited, obviously, but I like what they've done.
One guy I don't envy right now is Drew Wilson. He's got the task of trying to keep this football team in shape. And I don't know what realistic expectations are with that, but we know that he's working hard, sending out personalized videos based on what equipment guys have or don't have. I think you had a chance to chat with him briefly recently, correct?
Yeah, a few weeks ago I chatted with him, and basically the same thing. I mean, he's just like, well, it's not ideal, but he has basically talked to every player on the team and found out what do you have at your home, and then what is near you that you have access to. And so he was kind of joking with me, but it's serious. That, like, for some, it's, can you bench press a sibling, and it's,
So this is when every CU football player could use a Great Dane in their family, right?
Right. But realistically, I mean, if you're a lineman or whatever, and you've got a brother that's in 8th grade or whatever, can you bench press him? Do you have a tree? He's told guys, do you have a tree near your house that's got sort of a flat branch that you can grab and do pull-ups on? Because he doesn't want them just doing push-ups. He wants some of that pull as well. Carson Wells, he told me, is down there at his ranch in Florida doing work with cattle. He goes, I'm not worried about him. He's farm strong. But he's basically talked to everybody, found out what do you have, and he said there's a handful of guys that actually have access to a gym. I do know that, like, Tyler Lytle has actually been out throwing with other quarterbacks and working out in California, with a private coach, and you can socially distance that way a little bit. So he's been doing a little bit of that, but just finding out whatever these guys can do, and it's not ideal, but making the best. Now, one of the things he did say to me, I asked him, how long do you need to get these guys ready once you get them back? And he said, not very long, because their bodies, they're young. And he feels like they can bounce back in a couple of weeks.
And our guy, James Stefano, is out there kicking balls over trees.
That's right. That's right. So just finding out whatever you can, and just use that. So, credit James Stefano. Looking good, by the way.
Hard to have expectations for when they'll be back on campus. We could probably spend an hour kind of analyzing different possibilities. Probably a waste of time. I guess real quick, though, do you have a sense? It's hard to believe that the college football season will start on time and look the same that it normally does.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I try to be optimistic about these things, but, my feeling is that until the government and the public health officials say it's okay and schools open up, that nothing's going to happen. I mean, I just can't see the college football season happening. I don't think we're going to be at camp on August 1st.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I don't even know if we'll be in camp November 1st. I mean, will basketball season start on time? I have no idea what this is going to look like, how this is going to go. There's been so many scenarios thrown out. it sounds to me like one of the more popular ones is starting around January 1st and having sort of spring football, which will be really weird. And it'll be interesting because if you have a guy, this is another topic, I guess, Adam, but if you have a guy like Laviska Shenault, right, last year, if there's no season and they go to start January 1st, but the draft is still in April, do guys like Laviska play? Knowing that, hey, why would I play right now when I'm going to get drafted in 3 months? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with all this.
Yeah. Rick George, Carl Jarrell, Tad Boyle, J.R. Payne, all going to take a pay cut, a 10% pay cut. Other campus leaders are going to take a pay cut as well, and then the remaining head coaches are going to take a 5% pay cut. Rick George has been on some conference calls with the media, and he said they're really trying to prepare for everything at this point. So, again, it's hard to predict exactly what the impacts are going to be on CU financially.
Yeah, it really is. We know, not having those concerts, the Dead Company this summer, if they can't reschedule those, that's a big financial hit to the athletic department. That's a couple $1 million in revenue. Not having the camps, Rick George mentioned to us, that's not a huge thing, but it's still something. And for like soccer coach Danny Sanchez, that's part of the income, right? And some of those assistant coaches, that's part of the income. So it is hard to know what it's going to look like because without fans in the stands and without football, this is going to get real serious real quick because you start to wonder if, a 10% pay cut, that's significant for no matter who you are. But if there's no football, we're going to start looking at, does cross country get cut? Does, I'm trying to think of the sports, but does soccer get cut? Things like that. We're starting to look at maybe sports getting cut, and that's going to be significant.
You mentioned Laviska Shenault. I don't think we should spend a ton of time on the NFL draft just because by the time some people consume this, it's going to be kind of outdated. We don't necessarily know where all these guys go. We do know that Laviska Shenault was not a first-round pick. We had kind of assumed that was going to be the case here recently. I think had he had a really good performance at the Combine, not needed that core surgery, he probably would have been a first-round pick. There's no question he's a first-round talent. It's going to be interesting to compare his career with some of those receivers that went in the first round that are really good players, but Laviska's just as good or maybe better.
Yeah, and I think right away the initial comparison is going to be Brandon Ayuk, who was the Pac-12 guy. With Laviska, I'm torn on him because he is a first-round talent, but if I'm an NFL GM, I'd be a little nervous about him. I love the kid. I think he's a fantastic talent, but he's played 2 years basically of college football. That first year he didn't really play. Basically played 2 years. He didn't play a full season either time and was banged up, and he's had a lot of injuries. Goes to the Combine and gets hurt. That's not a good sign. Frankly, I was surprised he didn't get that core injury, that surgery right after the season. I thought hindsight's 2020, but that might have been the best course of action for him to be ready for that Combine because even with the injury history, if he has a really good Combine, he probably goes in the first round, right?
Yeah.
But that injury history, I would shy away from him a little bit. I'd be a little nervous about him. I'd take a chance on him in the second or third round, but as a first-round pick, it doesn't surprise me that he didn't go in the first round.
That's about it for current events. Obviously, not a whole lot going on in the sports world right now. So that'd be fun to kind of take a trip down memory lane. You spent a lot of time on the men's basketball beat. You've been on the football beat for a long time now. So we're going to run through some different topics and try to have some fun with this. The first one on here are the 3 games we most enjoyed covering during our time on the beat. Again, it could be football or men's basketball. Maybe go reverse order from 3 to 1. What's the third most enjoyable game you've covered on the beat?
Yeah, it was tough because even though the football hasn't been great in the 10 years that I've covered, there's been a lot of good games and basketball and things like that. But my number 3, it's sort of a tie. Can I do that?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know if I want to break your rules, but sort of that 2018 game, CU versus CSU, I thought was a lot of fun. That was Laviska's breakout game. That was a lot of fun. But really, I guess if I had to go with one of them for number 3, it'd be that Utah game in 2016, Utah CU for the Pac-12 title. That was a blast. I mean, that was the first time we've ever been a part of something like that. At least I have, seeing them win that conference title or that division title. But I would go number 3 there.
That was actually my number 2. CU's win over Utah and Boulder in 2016. And I did a Throwback Thursday feature talk with Cepho Lufau, and I hadn't forgotten about it, but it kind of brought back the memory of Cheeto Bay Awuzie's play where he chased down Kyle Fulks on the kickoff coverage.
That's right.
The defense goes out there, holds Utah to a field goal. And that to me was kind of a microcosm of that team and that whole season and their leadership and their never give up attitude. Kenneth Olabode, late scoop and score. He was a guy that was kind of maligned earlier in his career to have a big moment. Pope Lindsay has the game-winning or game-clinching first down on third down, that run. Just so many memorable moments there. And then, we're booking travel to go cover the Pac-12 championship game after that.
Right.
Who thought that was even a possibility going into that season? So that's definitely high up on my list, at number 2 for me.
Yeah, that was a fun game, and certainly it was hard to go beyond 2016 when looking at the best games for football. But yeah, that Utah game was number 3 for me. Should we go number 2?
I still have to do my number 3, which
number 3
is CU beats third-ranked Oklahoma in 2007. The Buffs won just 4 of their first 16 games under Dan Hawkins, and we know what happened the final 3 years of his tenure. We don't have to hash over that, but that 2007 season and that win specifically created a lot of excitement. It really jumped the recruiting efforts up to another level. I know that class didn't pan out in 2008, but it was ranked 15th in the country, and that win over OU was a big part of that. CU doesn't go to a bowl game in 2007 without that win. They were 6-6 and went out to Shreveport to play Alabama. So that one snuck in there. I know some fans probably don't want a Dan Hawkins era win on my list, but that was a fun day at Folsom Field.
Yeah, I unfortunately was not there for that one. I came on the beat 3 years later, Hawkins last year. One thing I'll say about Dan Hawkins is I know he's not loved in Boulder, and his tenure was not overall great, but I will say this: his teams were competitive, and he did provide some pretty good moments. I mean, there was that game. There was the one against West Virginia. That game against Georgia, I thought in 2010 was a really good game. That one I kind of considered for this top 3 list as well. So Hawkins at least provided some competitive teams that would upset a team now and then.
By simply having this game on my list, I've already said more nice things about Dan Hawkins today than I'm willing to. So move along. What's your number 2?
On. Number 2, I'm going to go basketball, and I'm going to go the Kansas game in 2013, December of 2013. Obviously, Askia Booker hits the game winner. But, I mean, that's what we remember from that game. But that was such a fantastic basketball game. I'll always remember, Spencer Dinwiddie played well. Ben Mills actually came in and had a couple baskets and got the crowd going a little bit. And but certainly that shot from Askia, that was a pretty fantastic moment.
And the fans almost injured him afterwards in the celebration.
Yeah, his shoulder, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah, he came into the post-game press conference holding his shoulder with an ice bag over it.
Great. Costly win here. But that was such a fun basketball game. And there's been a lot of great moments in the TAD, but for me, that was the best one.
All right. Well, I already gave my number 2. Your number 1, I'm curious to see if it's the same as mine.
Well, for me, it was the CU at Oregon game in 2016.
Yep.
And, I know that there were bigger games, and Oregon was not very good that year, but that was the game that really signaled that this team was really good. And, to me, that Oregon team is not that bad if CU doesn't win that game. I think if Oregon wins that game, they go on, they're a pretty good team. So I think for what that meant for that CU team, for this program, and really just the moments, the Bryce Bobo catch, the way Steven Montez played in that game, the Yakela Witherspoon interception, the Devin Ross catch was pretty fantastic as well. And then, of course, Steven Montez's post-game press conference was an all-timer as well. The da-na-na-na-na-na. So, that was, for me, the best one.
Yeah, there's so many times I've wondered since that season, if they lose that game in Eugene, how does the rest of the season play out? Now, there was a lot of talent on that football team, but 4 guys in the secondary, they're in the NFL now, and Philip Lindsay, and the list goes on. But they're not winning the South without that win, that's for sure. And I don't know, they're probably a 8-win team that year, 7-win team if they don't win that game. I feel like that really,
I agree.
To your point, kind of propelled their confidence level to a different level that we honestly haven't seen since.
Yeah, and I think who knows what happens? But I agree with you. I think if they lose that game, maybe they win 7 games and go to a bowl game, and it's still a good season. I think if Oregon wins that game, the Ducks are probably an 8-4, 7-5 type team, and they don't have that drop off that they had. So that's just my opinion. I think that was. I always remember Mark Helfrich afterwards. He said it was like a defining moment for both programs.
Yeah. All right. What about the flip side of it? The least favorite game you've ever covered on the CU beat? And I think this might be the same for both of us. We'll see.
I'm sticking with the 2016 season.
Really? Okay.
Well, I don't know.
Pac-12 championship game? Is that where you're going?
Well,
Alamo
I was going to
Bowl?
say Alamo Bowl just because, I mean, the coverage of it was fun. I mean, the whole week was fun, but the game itself was a stinker. But maybe the least favorite was maybe that Kansas game in 2010. I mean, that was such a stinker of a game, and the Buffs up by 28 in the fourth quarter and lose. And in hindsight for Buff fans, maybe that was a good game because that's the one that got Dan Hawkins out of town. But maybe that Kansas game.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I picked CU's overtime loss to Oregon State at Folsom Field in 2018 because at that point the Buffs are 5-2. That would have clinched bowl eligibility. I really do think if they beat Oregon State there, they don't have the collapse quite to the extent that it happened. And they beat Arizona and/or Cal down the stretch. They could have gone 7-5, possibly 8-4 that season if not for that collapse. The 2018 KU game, I mean, Dan Hawkins was going to be fired after that season anyway. So that's what put that over the top for me.
Right.
In terms of the Alamo Bowl Pac-12 championship game, very disappointing results. But at that point, on some level, CU was almost playing with house money that season. Going back to the Oregon State loss, you remember being in the press box before that game and we're breaking down bowl games? I mean, it was a foregone conclusion at that point that CU was going to a bowl game that season, and we're trying to break down all the matchups about where we might possibly get to spend a week that winter.
Right. Well, I remember speaking to that before the game, I sat with the 2 reps from the Sun Bowl, down in El Paso, and did an interview with them, and they were talking about how much it would mean to them to get CU down there because of Steven Montez, and how much of a hero he is in El Paso. And I'll always remember this guy's comment. He says, "I just don't know if CU is going to fall to us." And then CU didn't even make a bowl game, So, I mean, they were so excited to potentially get CU because of Steven Montez, and then it didn't even happen. But it's kind of sad that there's so many options here we have for this least favorite game. But you're kind of swaying me here, and that might be it because of what it meant. And I think that changed the course of this program, maybe more than some of those other ones. That was a pretty bad game.
I didn't cover this game. I believe you did. Men's basketball, would it be the loss to Pittsburgh, the just embarrassing loss in the tournament? Is there one you could think of that would top that?
Oh, that was ugly. I mean, that was another one where I was really excited to finally be covering the NCAA tournament and thinking about, how much fun this weekend's going to be. And then 5 minutes in, I'm thinking, well, this sucks. I'm going to go home after this. So that was a pretty bad game. I mean, I think as far as a game that wasn't as ugly, but that changed the course of the program was earlier that season when Spencer got hurt. And that was a surreal one to be at up in Seattle.
Didn't Trayshawn Fletcher, somebody else, injure their knee in that game too?
Trayshawn Fletcher tweaked his knee. I don't think he missed games initially, but I think he later did. But that floor was like a skating rink, and Spencer he was coming down the court and just awkwardly slipped, no contact or anything like that. And that was a bad one as far as what it meant to the program.
You just said awkwardly. We're going to get back to some positive topics here, but just awkward moments on the beat. What do you have there?
Well, there's no question what it is for me, and it's men's basketball. And I was just starting off covering CU. It was my first year, Tad Boyle's first year. I don't know if you were there or not, but that was the last year of the Big 12 and Alec Burks and all those guys. And they were so sure they were going to the NCAA tournament, and Tad hosted everybody at his house. Were you there?
Yeah, I was there.
I just remember being at the house, and watching everything go through. And there was I don't know how many people were there, but there was all the athletic department people, all the media, TV cameras, everything, just waiting for the reaction of CU. And as they went through each quadrant and you get into the last one, you're like, oh no. And when CU wasn't there, just that was one of more awkward moments, is having to do interviews with those guys not making the tournament when they expected it.
Yeah, most of my awkward moments come from press conferences. Obviously, the top of that list is John Embry's press conference after he gets fired. And I don't put that on John Embry at all. He just had his heart ripped out. This is a dream job for him. It's only 2 years in. He feels like he deserves more time. He's got his players in there, former Buffs scattered throughout the press seating. And that's on Mike Bohn that was the worst idea I think I've seen actually come out in my entire life. It was just a bad deal there.
Yeah, and then Mike Bohn had Dan Hawkins do a press conference as well, and that wasn't a whole lot less awkward when Hawkins did that. And Bohn's outgoing presser was a little interesting as well. So a lot of Bohn pressers there. But going with press conferences, it might be, that Utah game in 2018 when McIntyre comes up there, and you just kind of knew this is the end here, and this is a guy clawing and scraping either for his job or to get another job. I mean, he got weird at the end.
The Buffalo painting on the Tuesday press luncheon, is that what you're talking about? How the Buffalo walks into the storm?
Well, that was before that, but I mean, I'm talking about the post-game presser after that Utah snow game.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember asking him, do you feel like this might have been your last game? And he said, no, this wasn't my last game. And just, you kind of knew. But yeah, certainly the picture, the Buffalo picture, McIntyre had some moments there at the end.
Props at a press conference, if you're a football coach, never a good idea. Advise against that strongly.
That's right.
Let's get back to a positive topic. Favorite 3 players that you've enjoyed interviewing at CU? Again, football, basketball. Yeah.
I'm going to stick with football on all 3, but there's a lot of honorable mentions because there's been a lot of really good ones. But I go Cepho Lufau, Philip Lindsay, and Steven Montez. I mean, for me, those 3 of my favorite guys I've covered. Always real personable, always real good with me, and I think really good with most of the media. Always gracious with their time. If I threw out another one, Askia Booker, I know he was strange to some people, and people who loved him or hated him. I always had a really good relationship with him, and I enjoy talking to him quite a bit. And so those are probably the 3 being those football players, though.
Yeah, I had a tough time narrowing it down to 3 guys. Philip Lindsay was on mine as well. Obviously, his passion, you could just see it every time you talk to him. He didn't ever seem to have a bad day up at CU. It was always very energetic and positive. Probably before you were on the beat, but George Hippolyte, you could talk to him about literally anything. It could be current events in the world, and he'd have an opinion, and it's no surprise that he's a lawyer now. Just unbelievable. For fans that don't know this, the Rabid Goldfish nickname, he absolutely hated that. But I felt bad for him getting stuck with a nickname he didn't like. But he was great for media. And then Scotty Mcknight, who's obviously gone on to be successful in life and was just you could talk to him about anything as well. Just always really personable. I mean, there's just so many guys. James Stefano, we love talking to him. Mikel Onu this last year was incredible. He was really insightful. Tony Clemens back in the day, Tyler Hansen. Steven Montez definitely on my list if it was going to keep going here. Ben Burney, Ryan Miller, and even Cody Hawkins was awesome. Sometimes as media members, one of your colleagues especially had a lot of issues with Dan Hawkins, but Cody was a pleasure to interview and deal with during his career. It's unfortunate that he kind of gets lumped in with his dad with some of the negativity.
Yeah, and actually, we mentioned the Hawkins press conference earlier, but Cody came up at the end of that, and Cody handled it really well. If you remember that when Hawkins was fired, and Cody, he was really good to work with, and really good kid, and he deserved better. That's for sure. But James Stefano certainly on this current team, he's got to be at the top of the list. Dave Platty always does the best interview award, and if there's a season, I think James Stefano. I don't know if a kicker can get it because we're not going to talk to him a whole lot, but he could be in the running for that.
We'd have to lobby pretty hard. We'd have to get votes on our side, I think, for that one to win.
I think we have some pull over there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Basketball-wise, I would probably go Spencer Dinwiddie because not only was he really smart, but Yeah, he could create some controversy, referring to CSU as little brother. And even Tad he was such a good player that even Tad wouldn't step in to try to get him to stop saying certain things.
Well, I think Tad liked some of it, because Spencer was one that would back it up. When he would call CSU little brother, he would then go in and score 30 points and lead him to a win. So if he didn't do that, if he called him little brother and then had 12 points in a loss, I think Tad might have stepped in a little bit.
Do you have a favorite assistant coach you've interviewed over the years at CU?
I was thinking about that, and one of my favorites is actually, I know he's not a fan favorite, but Clayton Adams was one of my favorite people to cover. And part of it is I had a chance at the Casati Classic, Dave Platty's tournament. I was partnered with Clayton, and that was the funnest round of golf I've ever had. And 18 holes with him, he was a lot of fun. I really got along with him. I thought he was a good guy. And not as bad of a coach as people want to, as fans like to say about him. But he was a good guy. And Chiaverini, of course, is right up there. But there's a lot of them. I mean, you can go basketball. All the basketball assistants have been great to talk to. From Rodney Billups to Mike Rohn. All those guys, have been really good as well.
Coach Cap is my guy, and it's close though because there's a lot of guys. I love that after you were interviewing him, he would then take a minute to kind of expound on certain things. And not that you were going to necessarily write on that stuff. And it wasn't throwing players under the bus or anything like that, but it was just a real honest assessment of his unit, which you always appreciate getting. But we've been lucky. I mean, you even look at all the guys that got retained by Carl Durrell Shev. Darian Hagan's good when you can get him. Tyson Summers, he's got that kind of defensive coordinator edge that you kind of need. But with the media, he will expound on things, and Brian Michalowski's good as well. So we're lucky those guys are back on staff. We'll see how the rest of these guys. There really haven't been – Clayton Adams, you mentioned, he was awesome. It's unfortunate that his O-line groups didn't perform better because he obviously drew the ire of the fan base. It's hard to think of one that was really bad. Jim Leavitt was very challenging, though. If you wanted to get him, you weren't going to get the head coach. You weren't going to get any players or anybody else because you had to walk with him up the hill after practice because he didn't want to waste any more time of his day on media. So he was a little challenging in that regard. Ron Collins can bear a couple of former defense coordinators that were kind of rough around the edges as well, too. Maybe it's just a defensive coordinator thing. I don't know.
Well, and if you're Ryan Koenigsberg, you have to sit in the river with.
That's true. But that took coaxing to get Jim Leavitt to do that. Of course, when the camera turned on, he was great. He was always great when the camera was on. And he wasn't a jerk, but he was, I don't know, what's the right word to describe Jim Leavitt? Intense and maybe not the best team player in terms of a coach.
Yeah, intense. And he had his way, and that was the way. One of my best interviews, or my favorite interviews with Jim Leavitt was after he left. And it was that 2016 season. And as soon as he had left, I had contacted him through direct message on Twitter and said, I'd love to do an interview with you if you want to. I understand if you don't. And, a couple weeks later, I'm with my family in Minnesota right before Christmas, before coming back for bowl practices. And I get a message from Jim Leavitt that said, hey, I'm available tonight. This is like 2 weeks after I sent the message. He goes, you can call me tonight. And so there I was at my in-laws' house in Minnesota and chatted with him for 30 minutes. And, he was a great interview and, had good things to say about CU, but, his opportunity. But, certainly post-practice, that was a tough one because you're right. That was the only person you were going to get.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was a greatest look after he took the Oregon job. He came back the next Memorial Day, ran the Boulder with Oregon gear, thrown up the Ducks O in Folsom Field. I don't know if that was the best look for him either.
But that's Jim Leavitt. Jim Leavitt doesn't care, and it's his way.
Yeah. A few more topics here, kind of going to some different positive things we've experienced over the years. What are your favorite 3 Pac-12 road trips? Rank them from 3 to 1.
Okay, I'll go number 3. Might be a little surprising. I like Tucson, and I know, but I like to go hiking. There's some cool hiking areas down there. I took my son on that Arizona trip a few years ago, and we went down to Tucson, went a little farther south to Tombstone, and did all that. And so I just kind of like the area out there and hiking and things like that. So I'd go Tucson. You being an Arizona guy, I know you're an Arizona State guy. You're a little biased against Tucson, I'm sure.
My love for ASU is kind of gone, but my hatred for U of A, it still exists. I mean, there is good Mexican food down there. They've got an ostrich ranch you can hang out at, so it's not all bad.
Yeah, fantastic pizza place down there as well.
Yeah, my 2 and 3 are kind of together, and you're going to see kind of a common theme with my favorite Pac-12 road trips. And 3 and 2 are Cal and Stanford. Okay. I love the Bay Area. Try to stay in San Francisco, whether they're playing Cal or Stanford. Get great seafood. You can go for a run along the boardwalk. We don't have a ton of times on these trips, but you try to fly out maybe Friday morning to get a little bit of time in there. You fly back Sunday. So, certain cities you might want to spend more time in, but San Francisco is perfect for just a couple of days to get your fix of seafood. And usually the weather, it could be overcast at times, but usually it's generally pretty mild there. So those 2 for me are in the top 3.
Yeah, I'd put the Bay Area, right there as well. I love the Bay Area and love the seafood and all that stuff. So for me, number 2, I'm going to stick sort of that Northwest, that seafood theme, and Seattle. I love going to Seattle. Love the seafood there. I've actually brought my fishing gear with me, and
you caught an octopus there,
Friday
right?
Morning and spent a day fishing. Caught a squid.
Squid, that's right.
So I actually went salmon fishing throughout that Friday. Didn't catch anything, so then I'm walking along the pier that night and see all these people fishing, and asked them what they were fishing for. They said squid, and I was like, really? And they said, yeah, try it. And so they had me try it. So I tried it for a minute. Like, no, you got to stay until you catch one. And so actually caught a squid, and they're not huge, but they said it was the biggest one that they had caught all night. So I was happy to provide them some extra food. They keep them all, and they can keep like 50 pounds of squid, and they make stuffed squid and things like that, and calamari. So I love Seattle. I love being in the Pacific Northwest.
That's actually my number 1 for a lot of the same reasons. Yeah, some of the best seafood I've ever had there. Their shrimp cocktails, it's bigger than anywhere else it seems, and clam chowder. And the Pike's Place Market is just kind of a cool place to mull around, and so that's definitely. And even the stadium, it's not anything groundbreaking in terms of the press box or anything, but just to kind of look out and see people tailgating on the water out there is pretty cool. And so that's number 1 for me. What's your number 1?
My number 1 is it's going to be just the state of Oregon. Oregon State. I love going to Oregon for a lot of the same reasons, the seafood, all that stuff. We clearly don't have great seafood here in Colorado because we love going up there to get it. But, I love the state of Oregon. I mean, just the combination of the ocean and the mountains and things like that. It's a lot like Seattle. I mean, Seattle or Washington, Oregon are a lot of the same. But anytime I get to go to that area up there, I love it.
And the worst Pac-12 road trip, I already know we're in agreement here because I heard certain words come out of your mouth the last time we were there.
Los Angeles?
Oh, no. See, I was going to go Pullman.
Oh, Pullman, yeah. I'll take Pullman over Los Angeles.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
the traffic, or what don't you like?
Yeah, I hate the traffic. It's just the word. I mean, there's some fun things to do in LA, and I'm sure if you're from there, I don't mean to put that down. I apologize, but I just hate getting anywhere, and it's just there was one time I was out there, I think it was for Pac-12 Media Day, and I thought, I'm going to go to the Dodger game tonight. Well, it took me like 2 hours to get from the airport to the hotel. I was like, all right, forget the Dodger game, and you just kind of scrap your plans because it's just, it's a pain. But Pullman, it's not the prettiest place. I don't mind the drive. I'll take Pullman over Los Angeles.
Okay. Yeah, I have the Los Angeles schools low on my list too, but until Pullman gets a beach, they're at the bottom.
All right. So what is it you hate about Pullman? Just no beach?
The weather's usually pretty miserable there. It's hard to get there. There's not a lot of scenery, on the way there. Spokane's actually not a bad city, but the last time we were there, it was just miserable.
Yeah.
And if the weather is nice there, it's not quite as brutal, but it's just a little bit harder to get to. Next to last on my list was Oregon State. Corvallis just doesn't do a whole lot for me, although I do love staying in Portland, have family there, so it's good from that aspect of it. But the actual college town, I'm not a huge fan of. Who has the best? So go ahead.
We were there in Pullman together, obviously, this last season, and made that trip. A little snow on that trip, but certainly I will say Pullman has been the worst place for Colorado in the times I've been there. I've never seen CU play well in Pullman. I'm talking about men's basketball and football. They've always just been ugly games. And, so I think if you're CU, that's maybe the worst place. But as far as a place to visit, it's okay.
Yeah, and probably the most awkward post-game setup. They have you talk to the coach in this completely dark weight room, and there's no chairs for us, but they do put up a table for the head coach to sit there with lights on him. It's like you're doing an interrogation because you have to stand over him. And like you said, they played horribly. Mel Tucker, felt bad for the guy. We're standing there hammering them. Maybe CU fans will never feel bad for him again, but that was an awkward setup.
Well, I would say, going back to the awkward moments, one of the most awkward moments I had was 2 years before that with Mike McIntyre. I was the only reporter there in that setup. So if you can imagine, I had gone back towards the locker room with Curtis Snyder to find out if there's any players available. As we got back there, McIntyre was ready. So me, Curtis, and McIntyre walked together that long walk from the locker room to the weight room for the press conference. We're walking all that way just for me to talk to him, and so there was silence that whole way. And I don't know if fans remember the game, but that was one where Steven Montez gets pulled at half. It was just horrible. And I remember asking, McIntyre, is there a quarterback competition? And he said, after the way he played, yes, and, throwing all that out there. That was a pretty awkward moment.
It also was an awkward moment? The post-game press conference of the UCLA game, and would that be 2017?
Yeah, that sounds about right. The one where he glared at me?
Yeah. 100 times out of 100, Brian.
When I asked about the fake kick, the fake field goal with James Stefano at the end of the first half, still a dumb call. Let's have your backup quarterback that's never thrown a pass throw a pass to our 30-year-old kicker who's never caught a pass. And I love James Stefano, but that was not a good play call.
Who has the best press box food in the Pac-12 in your opinion?
Well, I think it's hands down CU. I don't think anybody can match. CU obviously caters Bender's Bar and Grill. Great food there. I think CU hands down. But if you had to go somewhere else, I think it's kind of a toss-up. I might go Oregon. What do you think?
Yeah, Oregon is solid, but their big thing is those O cookies that I don't know. I could take them or leave them. They're kind of hard. It's not the style of cookie I go for. But I would probably say Utah because they usually cater barbecue. Yeah, and one thing and it helps me because you only get to go through it one time. And so that way you don't overeat while you're covering the game. Whereas CU, you're right, the food is great. But, man, I put on at least 5-10 pounds every football season because of that.
Well, see, it depends on what your eating habits are if you're going to rank Utah higher or not. Because if you want those extra trips, then Utah's got to be low on the list, right? So,
for me, that actually gives them a benefit, a positive.
See, for a big guy like me, that's kind of disappointing. You don't get to go back for seconds.
Oregon State's kind of randomly solid too. They've done fajitas when I've been out there. That's been pretty good. Yeah,
I don't know if there's any real bad ones. I mean, I will say I remember on a basketball trip going to Washington, and that's the only place I've ever had to. I'm not complaining here. I mean, we get perks, but that's the only place I've ever had to buy my drink. There's usually at least like CU basketball, they don't provide food, which is fine, but you get a drink. There's some water or soda. But at Washington, that was the only place in the press room. There's a vending machine, so you have to buy your own drink. So, that was a little bit disappointing. So I rank them low because of that.
Yeah, it's funny. This past season, in our Tuesday press luncheons, they feed us. And for some reason, I have no idea, they started bringing in cucumber water for us. And we're all kind of looking at each other like, does anybody like this? It's kind of gross. And, of course, Neil Welk says that, sports writers are the only profession that will complain about free food, and he's probably right.
He's probably right, but that cucumber water is not good. And I don't care if it's free or what. I don't want a cucumber in my water.
Exactly.
I don't really, my wife likes lemon water. I don't really care for any of that stuff, but I'll take a lemon or some citrus in there. A cucumber, no.
Agreed.
I started bringing my own water.
Are there any upcoming non-conference trips you're looking forward to?
Florida in 2028.
Okay.
It's too far down the road. There's no way I don't think either one of us is going to be there for that game. I hope we are. But honestly, the one I'm most looking forward to is the one we may not be able to do, and that's Texas A&M this year. I'm really looking forward to. I hope that we can go down there, just because I've always wanted to see a game at College Station, or those type of stadiums. Texas A&M, any of those southern states. I've never been to a game down there, so I'm looking forward to hopefully going down to College Station.
I'm randomly looking forward to 2022 at Minnesota. I was born there. Haven't been back in about 25 years. I know your wife's from there, so you go back there quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to that trip here in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's one on the list too. And for that reason is, my wife, she loves going back to Minnesota in the fall, but it's been a long time since we've been back there in the fall. So that's one I look forward to, just because she'd probably go with me, and you'll be able to go back in the fall. So that'll be a fun one as well.
That's it for our topics. Brian, you hanging in there with the family? How are you guys dealing with this whole pandemic?
Well, we're doing some online schooling and, getting through that. And I know you are as well. And just waiting for things to open up again. I don't know when school will start. I don't know when camp will start. Just kind of waiting. I haven't shaved in a little bit, and I don't know how long I'll keep that going, but it's kind of nice to not shave.
Speaking of homeschooling, I've always had a strong appreciation for teachers, but it's been multiplied during this. And trying to learn math now is one of the most frustrating things. They do it completely different now.
Yeah, they do, and I don't understand it. I've had so many of my kids. My youngest now is starting to learn some of that. We have 4 kids, and they'll bring me that stuff. I'm like, why are you doing it this way? Just do it like this, and get it done in half the time. But I guess they figured out some methods of kids learn certain ways, and that's not how I learn, though.
I was correcting my daughter's math homework before she submitted it last week, and I told her to change something, and then we get the results the next day from the teacher, and she had it right, and I screwed her up. So she's learning in spite of me at this point.
Your kids need to get back to school, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, they're in trouble if this goes on into next school year, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we all are.
Well, Brian, it was fun taking a trip down memory lane here. Hopefully the fans out there enjoyed it. Maybe we'll get together here again soon.
Yeah, it might be the only way we see each other for a while.
Exactly. All right. Thanks to all of you. Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks to all of you for tuning in.